While they're doing that, you can turn to 1 Corinthians 13. The scripture will also be up on the screens. While you're doing that, yesterday, a lot of our folks showed up at the State Theater to watch Alex direct the Spotsylvanians, and that was just fabulous. That was really a great concert, and that was a side of Alex I had never seen before, and it was just outstanding. And I would just venture to guess that a third of the crowd were Culpeper Baptist people. So thank you for coming out and doing that. But thank you, Alex, for how you're a part of a bigger world in your work there. 1 Corinthians 13, a familiar passage, and I'm going to read the whole chapter. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It's not rude. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. And when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. I mentioned last week that I've been thinking and praying a lot about this season of our church's life and what it means for us to be a church together and on mission for a kingdom vision at this point in time. And we're really trying and praying and getting excited about all the ways that God is at work in our community and how He's providing opportunities for us to connect to His work and expand the kingdom. And those are just really exciting conversations. And at the same time, we're walking together as a congregation through grief, through sadness, through tough times. And we're going to keep doing that for the foreseeable future. And the strange thing about who we are as a congregation right now is that many times in the same day, I'm doing both those things. I'm with a family during a time of significant crisis or loss, and then in the afternoon, I'm in a conversation about how the kingdom is expanding around us. And it really is a challenging balance for our congregation right now. So how are we going to do that? And I suggested last week that one of the ways we do it is just by walking together, just by waking up each day and staying at it and walking in faithfulness. And today I want to add to that baseline this idea of loving. We're going to walk together and we're going to be loving. And I think you would agree with me that one of the challenges of being the church in our culture at this time is that we're not perceived to be loving. Not a lot of folks out there who, if you ask them today, give me the top 4 words that you would use to describe the church, not many would use the word loving at all. And that kind of blows my mind. And it's hard for me to get my head around because I've spent my life in the church. And I have been loved incredibly by the church. And my definition of love in my life often comes through the experiences I've had with people in the church. But clearly, we have missed this with our culture. And I really do believe the path to renewal for our culture, the path to renewal for most churches, is coming back to a concept of loving that Paul expresses here in 1 Corinthians 13. Because love is who we follow, right? We follow one who loves. And I say this a lot, if your theology starts any other place than the sentence, God is love, then whatever your theology is after that is going to be messed up. Because God is love. That is who we follow. That's the foundation of what we believe. And Jesus Christ expects us to love like he does. He came, he died, he gave himself up for me and you. And because we've experienced that love, then the goal of the church, the goal of our lives, is to make everyone aware of that kind of love. The one who sacrificed for our sins, the one who accepts all people, the one who loves us. And Jesus has been leading this revolution of love for more than 2,000 years. And it is a revolution that has absolutely changed the world more than anything else. This is the one we follow. And yet Jesus never organized a protest. He never led a march. As far as we know, he never wrote his congressman, right? He never posted some goofy thing on social media. He never felt the need to confront the social sins of his day. Never sought political office or political change of any kind. He came and he loved. And he lived a life of love, and the world has been changed by people who have followed that life of love. The world has not been changed by changing laws. The world has been changed by changing people. The way we change the world, if we're going to do it anything like Jesus suggested, is by going out and sharing his love with people and seeing their lives changed. Those of you who were here when we showed Paper Tigers a few weeks ago, the compelling sentence for me of that whole documentary is, a child can be changed by the presence of one caring, loving adult. Doesn't have to be 100, one. And in our church and all across the churches of this country, there are a lot of loving, caring adults. And the world can be changed by that. And we need to remind ourselves that never in all of the Bible has any group of Christians confronted anyone in the world for any other reason than to offer them forgiveness of sins and eternal life in Jesus Christ. That's what they did. And in doing that, the world was changed. And Paul says here in 1 Corinthians 13, which is not a chapter he wrote so we could read it at weddings, right? That's not at all what was on his mind. It's a chapter he wrote specifically to the church, and he's saying that love is the greatest expression of the gospel. That Paul, who was the greatest theologian I think the church has ever known, Paul, who was brilliant, who said a lot of different things, but when you boiled it down for Paul, Paul said love is the greatest expression of the gospel. Now I will show you the most excellent way. And then he says we can be good at something, but if we're not good at loving, then we're good for nothing. If I speak of tongues and men and of angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move a mountain, but don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, now hear this, if I give all I possess to the poor, surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. And you kind of get the idea that God and Paul think love is pretty important. And he's telling us that the loving Christian without any gift at all is worth more than the gifted Christian without any love. That no matter what we do, if we're not moving from the motivation of the deepest kind of love through Jesus Christ, then what we do is absolutely useless and worthless and without reward. Now, I would expect if someone in our church gave all of their money to the poor, and then that same person in our church surrendered their body to the flame, that you all would want me to say something good about them at their funeral, right? I mean, they've given everything away and then were martyred for the faith. You all would expect me to stand up and say, what a great believer this person was. And Paul, who knew people, who had given all that they had to the poor and who had been martyred for their faith, says to that same group of people, if they did it without love, it doesn't matter. Love's important. And the thing that identifies a follower of Christ is love. And this kind of love, interestingly enough, is not recognized as aggressive love. It's a love that knows when to hold back. It's a love that does not react. Love is patient, Paul says. How are you doing being lovingly patient with your spouse or your family member who's not following Christ right now? Love is patient. Love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, is not proud, is not rude, is not self-seeking, is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil. Love doesn't like to see people fail. Doesn't like to see people make mistakes and fall on their faces. It rather delights when people find the truth and come to life in knowing Jesus Christ. Love roots for people. As you look around at our culture today, as you look around at the Christian church, I'm not so sure we're rooting for people. Too often we celebrate when folks who are not like us don't do well. And Paul says that's not love. And love that expresses itself through Jesus Christ knows when to rejoice, knows when to be kind and patient. And Paul says love also knows when to reach out. It always protects. And it's the nature of love to protect when someone is down and hurting. Not to add to their agony. And it's the nature of love when someone is slandered and maligned and gossiped about, to protect them and not help spread their struggle. Love always protects, always trusts. Christian's not the one going around distrusting, doubting, not believing. Love always trusts. It always hopes. Never loses hope. And it doesn't give up. It never says, you had your chance and you blew it, so I'm done with you. Love perseveres. And Paul's description here is the description of Jesus. It's the picture of Jesus' love. And as I understand God's word, that picture is supposed to be duplicated. There should be a lot of copies of that picture of that kind of love. And you and I are to be those copies. We're supposed to be like him. Paul says it's the goal of every believer to become like Christ. We're to be copies of 1 Corinthians 13. You remember in Antioch in Acts when they first gave them the word Christian, that word that means little Christ. And I actually don't think that was a derogatory thing when they gave them that name. I believe the people in Antioch saw those folks and how they loved God and how they loved each other and how that because of all of that love, that God's word was important to them. And they saw that when they left their time of fellowship, they just wouldn't stop talking about Jesus, and they told people how much Jesus loved them and how he's a friend of sinners and how he is greater than all of their sins. And they talked about Jesus, and they lived like Jesus, and they loved like Jesus. And I think the people of Antioch said, man, there's just something different there. They're like little Christ. And that's what we're supposed to be. Love never fails. Now, it's kind of fun to look at the different translations of that phrase. Love never gives up. Love never falls to the ground. Love never drops out of line. Love never loses its strength. Love never stops trying. Other things will fail, but love will not. Love never fails. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And so Paul summarizes this incredible chapter and says when the tally is made on that great day, when all that's important is the only thing that's left, there will be faith, because you can't please God without faith. And hope will be left. In fact, the hope of heaven will be our reality. And then he says love will be left. And that the greatest of the great, the greatest of the things that will be left is love. And why is that? Because that's who we are. God so loved the world. And so if we're people of God, we're people of love. We don't get to opt into that one. That's who we are. And we've been encouraging all of us to read the Bible together, and we've been doing that without chapters and verses, and still want to encourage you to do that because it's an important part of who we are in the transformation. And the reason you need to do that with this chapter is because the last line of verse 12 says, I will now show you the most excellent way. And then the first words of chapter 14 says, follow the way of love. See, we need to get those in there, don't we? Follow the way of love. Well, what does it mean to follow the way of love? Well, it's interesting what Paul does here. When he talks about chasing down Christians before he had his encounter with Christ, when he was imprisoning women and children because they were followers of Christ, the phrase he used was, I chased those people down to stop them. And then right here he uses the same word. He says, I want you to spend your life chasing the way of love. And we remember Paul before he became Christ, and he was so passionate about those believers who were wrong, and he was chasing them down with all the energy and zeal he could possibly bring. And then when he talks about chasing love, he uses the same wording. Chase it. Chase it all the way to eternity. Follow it, chase it, track it down. Go after the way of love. And I got to confess, that hasn't been the hallmark of my Christian life. Well, I've chased a lot of things that I thought God wanted me to chase, but I haven't been as committed to chasing the way of love. So how are you going to chase the way of love? Well, you got to have Christ if you're going to do it. And I don't mean join a church. I don't mean pass a test over a few doctrines. I don't mean that you say, I believe Jesus was the Son of God, I believe Jesus died on the cross, I believe Jesus is coming again. I don't think that matters to any of what we're talking about. It means acknowledging that you need Christ and he's your Lord. And if you're going to follow the way of love, that's where it's got to start. It starts with Christ. And the mistake we've too often made in the church in my lifetime is we've seen a community and we've seen people that are struggling with life. And we reach out with them with doctrine. Oh, you got to believe what we believe and then you'll be good. And we reach out to them with theology and we reach out to them with rules and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that stuff doesn't matter. What I am saying is Jesus reached out in love. And that's what he's asking us to do. And last week we talked about the beauty of just walking together. Simple idea. Just each day. Every now and then we'll get to soar with the Eagles. We'll get to run with the Olympians. But most days we're just going to walk. And each day we're going to wake up and say, you know what? I'm going to decide to walk with God today. And I'm going to decide to do that in the community of my church. Right? That's a decision we make every day. I'm going to walk with God. And then just building on that baseline, we're going to follow the way of love. And if we could do that for a week, right? Here's the homework part of the message. If we could just do that for a week, it might become 2 weeks. And then if we did it for 2 weeks, it might become a couple of months. If we did it for that, it might become 6 or 7 months, maybe even a year. And then I think, and I'll try not to be snippy here, without the benefit of a marketing campaign and direct mail, and some silly things we do in the community, I think the community might just look over at us and say, hey, they seem to love us. There's something different about them. Look at how they love God. Look at how they love each other. Look at how they love us. And suddenly, we'd be in relationship with a lot of people we're currently not in relationship with. And suddenly, a lot of those folks will want to hear about Jesus. And suddenly, those of us who really like to talk theology and doctrine and making sure people's beliefs line up with their lives, we'll have all that opportunity then. But it'll start because we loved them. Because that's what Jesus did. And he's asked us to be copies of him in this world. And if we'll do that, this community will be changed.